All right, biologists, let's take a look at this question here. A gene in cattle controls whether horns develop or not. When cattle without horns are mated together, none of the offspring ever have horns. Looks like a silly piece of information. Why would I tell you this? Because this is very important, okay? When no horns are mated together, none of the offspring ever have horns. Now, if you remember the pea situation with Mendel, he had two colors of pea, right? So he had green peas with green peas, and he would cross them, and the offspring would always be green. He would have yellow peas that when he would cross would always give yellow. Now, when he crossed yellow and green, he would also have yellow. But when he crossed this generation here, when this generation was crossed, he would get 3 yellows for every 1 green. So here, when greens are crossed, never ever you have a yellow. But when yellows are crossed, you might, depending on the situation, end up with a green pea. So what does it mean? It means that when recessives are crossed, never ever you have a dominant. So why do they tell you, oh, when cattle without horns are mated together, none of the offspring ever have horns? Because horns are dominant. So we know here that horns are dominant. I'm going to write up here. Horns are dominant. I'm going to call it big H because of that. Small h, no horn, is recessive. All right. So a male with horns is mated with females without horns. So the females without horns, we know that they are small h, right? They are homozygous recessive because that's the only way recessives are expressed, right? They have to be homozygous. Now, a male with horns might be homozygous or heterozygous. How do you know that? So let's erase here a little bit. How do we know if the male is homozygous or heterozygous? There's a thing called test crossing. Test crossing is used to determine if this dominant here, a male with horns, if this dominant is homozygous or heterozygous. So is the male, okay, the male, I know they have one big H because they are dominant. What about the other one? The other allele, it could be homozygous dominant or it could be heterozygous. So let's solve this problem here with a good old Punnett square. So let's take a look here at the Punnett square. What we have a grid. The females are homozygous recessive, so they are up here. The males have the big H and something else that I don't know. Okay, I'm just gonna leave it blank here for now. So let's do the crossing with what we know, right? So these two are heterozygous, and I know that the small h is here because of the female, right? What else do they tell you? They tell you half of the offspring have horns. So this half here have horns, and the other half do not. So half of the offspring have horns, but half do not. What is the genotype they must have in order not to have horns? They must be homozygous recessive. That means the male here is heterozygous. What if the male was homozygous dominant? Then all of the offspring would have horns. This is how you do a test crossing. If 100% of the offspring is dominant, that means the dominant parent was homozygous. If half of the offspring is dominant and the other half is recessive, that means the dominant parent was heterozygous. So what can we cross out here? The male is homozygous dominant. No, we know the male is not homozygous. The male is homozygous recessive. Absolutely not. Recessives don't have horns here in this question. Only males have horns. Now, could this be a thing? Yes, it could, but there's absolutely no indication whatsoever in this question that sex has anything to do with horns. There's no indication that only males have horns. At no moment they talk about Y chromosome. At no moment they indicate a reason for you to suspect that there's a difference between males and females. So no, keep it simple. Answer letter C, the male is heterozygous.